Boop, there it is. And we're live. We're just going to give it a second. What is going on? We are just going to give it a second. See if some folks are going to come in. And look at me. I'm not even ready. Hold on. I thought I was. I thought I had everything. Okay, now I'm ready. What's up, everybody? Wow, doing things on the computer, multitasking, what a time. Okay. Awesome. Hey, everyone. It's me. My name is Saya. I'm the manager at Rainbow Alley at the Center on Colfax. My pronouns are whatever you feel in the moment. You can't be wrong. And today we are super blessed and honored to have Samuel Wood, a member of DCPA, here to spit some wisdom around the career of theater and the art of storytelling. And what I think is super compelling is how storytelling goes into the gay rights movement and how it has helped propel us to where we are today. So I'm super excited to dive into that with Sam. Just to give you a little background on Sam, he got his MFA in theater from the National Theater Conservatory. And since graduating, he has worked in professional theater and in academic settings as well. He started teaching he started teaching with the Denver Center of Public. Ooh, well, I was about to mess that up.
Denver Center for the Performing
Arts. I don't know why.
I got public graduate school.
Sorry, y'all. Began teaching at DCPA Theater Academy while also serving as the co-chair for the Charleston School of the Arts Theater Department in South Carolina. And that is where he really discovered his passion for youth theater. He finds working with young people energizing, wildly creative, and artistically challenging. While in South Carolina, he directed a number of highly acclaimed productions, Go Off, Stage and Piccolo, Spoleto, I'm going to butcher that.
Spoleto USA. It's the largest North American theater and arts conference in the world.
Go Off, honestly. Yeah. Come on, resume. Since going back to Denver, Sam worked as the Youth Engagement Manager in Kaiser Permanente's Art Integrated Resources Department, supporting youth leaders in addressing community challenges using the arts. That is super cool to me. Since 2019, Sam is once again a team member of the Education Department at the DCPA. So just welcoming Sam into our space. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. It's so awesome to have you. And also a quick shout out introduction of Kendra, our ASL interpreter for this evening, representing Rain Frog Interpreters. So just shout out to Kendra for always showing up, showing out, and making sure we're as accessible as possible. And without further ado, I'm just going to throw it to Sam and we're going to dive right on in. Once I find my outline. Before we get too far, I'm so sorry. Before we get too far, for everyone, if you have not already, please take out our pre-survey. The link is right there, surveymonkey.com/r/theater career 1 for the pre-survey. The post-survey is literally the exact same link with a 2 at the end. So sorry about that. We're ready to dive in.
Well, I think where I want to start is why I got into theater to begin with.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 12 years old. I was living in Northern Africa, in Chad, and I had the privilege to participate in a Hausa ceremony, which was about young boys becoming a man. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And I showed up in my Boy Scout uniform, with my Boy Scout backpack, with my Boy Scout sleeping bag, my Boy Scout, just decked out. The
Just
whole
ready.
entire everything that I had when I was a Boy Scout in the States. And all the other boys from the tribe were all lined up, and all they had on was a little braided belt around their waist and a knife. And we were supposed to go out into the bush and spend the evening and discover ourselves. But before we went, the elder of the tribe came up to me and tapped me on right in the middle of my chest with the dirtiest finger I've ever seen. And he was old. I was 12, and he looked ancient, and he only spoke Arabic, and I spoke French. So my dad interpreted. And this man told me that I was supposed to remember that there was a big magic in stories. When I went out into the bush, I was back to the Range Rover with the minute it got dark. I didn't spend very much time out there. And I never thought about that again until I was 19 years old. I went down to Cedar City, Utah to be a costumer because I didn't do any acting. And my boyfriend was in the show, so I went there just really to follow him. No intention of being in a show. I was an extra in Richard III. I was on stage. We helped carry the dead body of the king onto the stage, and then I stepped back. And as an experienced actor, I just kind of watched the audience because I hadn't been trained at all. And this happened to be a really great production, a production about power, about government, about rights of individuals. And I watched an audience, just when I was just standing there on stage, go from talking and whispering to completely silence to actually being engaged in the story. At the end of the play, the audience would leave. And we were supposed to, at that point, I was supposed to be part of the green show, meaning I sold things, dressed in Renaissance outfits. But they came out and they weren't really interested in any of that because they were talking about the political aspect of the play. Completely left the theater having been changed by this experience. And that's when I remembered that I had been told when I was 12 that there's a big magic in stories. Stories can change us. Stories can make us understand the world in a new way. Stories can help us understand new steps and where to go next. A famous theater practitioner, Augusto Boal, said that theater can and should change our world. We should be able to make the world into what we know it should be. And that's why I became a theater practitioner, because I know that stories can change us.
That's so, I liked where you went with that, right? I think what's important about what you said is what's the impact of the story is that it really changes you. It really taps you into a part of almost empathy. You are understanding a whole nother perspective. And even just, I know we're talking about like theater and plays, but even just, the simple act of sharing our own individual stories in our life can be super impactful.
Exactly. And I think as a gay man when I was a young man in the 80s at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and being able to tell people that you were gay was almost a political action, because it was about helping people understand that we're no different. Gay men and women the LGBTQ community is no different than any other community, and that we still have families that we love. We still have jobs and passions that we love, and we're not different from anybody else. And that idea of sharing a story really was what started the gay movement. When we think of of all the rights that we've gained over the years and the rights that we still need to gain, we've been doing that through storytelling, effective storytelling. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about tonight, is what this is all about, and why we've done that. Why has the gay community embraced storytelling so much? I mean, we have National Coming Out Day, and it's not a mistake. We do that because this is how we promote and how we change people's hearts. And we move information from people's minds into their hearts. And when you do that, that's when the world takes on a new way, and a new way of looking at the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, when I'm talking to people about social justice and how change happens, right? It's literally what you said. It's one thing to know the terms, to know the concepts, to know, you can know everything all day, but really it's not until you feel it that you can take action. And you feel responsible for taking action too.
Absolutely. So I think I'm going to start my Prezi that
Yes,
I created. And I'm not technical, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm hoping that everything will work out.
It's going to be so great. It's going to be perfect.
Okay, so I'm pushing the screen share now. And then I do this middle thing, because we practiced this.
We did.
It didn't do it. What did I do wrong?
Oh, nope, you did nothing wrong. There you go. So now you have your Prezi.
Huh.
Yeah, so now you go to the tab with your Prezi.
Oh, I just go to my Prezi tab? Because you can see my screen now?
I can see your screen, yes.
There we are.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is going to be about two things. I've tried to make two things happen at the same time. We're going to talk about what are the careers in theater, but we're also going to talk about building community through storytelling. So this is storytelling really is a very powerful tool that can bring communities together. And so I'm going to share with you an example of this storytelling that's really was an eye-opening moment for me. And then this is the reason why I love working with young people. In Charleston, South Carolina, I worked as the head of the theater department for the School of the Arts. And the students, in order to graduate, had to do a one-person show. They had to costume it, they had to light it, they had to write the script, they did everything. And I had this amazing young actor, her name was Nikita. And Nikita went to her town of McKellenville, which is just outside of Charleston. And she interviewed all the people in the town concerning a tree, a great big oak tree that had been planted in the center of town and had been there for about 250 years. And every year there was controversy over whether this tree should be pulled down or not. And she started the show off by she played about 36 different characters, all characters people that she had interviewed in town. And she wove their dialogue together. And over the course of the play, you discovered that this tree was a lynching tree. And she presented both sides of the argument of why this tree, which was both a symbol of the town, but also this horrible symbol of oppression, what everyone thought about it. When the play was over, the first night she performed it, we closed the curtain and there was no clapping for about 2 minutes. And Nikita was like, "Oh no, I failed. I've done it wrong." And then the applause started. The show had such an impact on the audience that they didn't know, they were stunned. They didn't know what to say or what to feel. And it took a good 2 minutes of them sitting in silence before they could respond. Because of that, she started a dialogue in her town about this tree, and that turned into wonderful uh, results. It brought people together. It changed people's perspective, and there was significant change in how people related to each other and around this tree. The tree was then just was brought down, but in its place they put a memorial of people who had died. And this was all because of a little 18-year-old being brave enough to tell the story of her community.
Wow. I've never heard that story before. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's my own experience of being in South Carolina and working with this amazing young woman who just was so brave.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about telling your story and being brave, in our gay community, we have to remember Harvey Milk. Because Harvey Milk really made, he was controversial even in the gay community. He was one of the first gay men to be elected to a city council. And this is his quote that he said: "We will not win our rights by staying quietly in our closets." Mm-hmm. His rally cry at all of his, he took years to get elected too. I mean, it wasn't like he ran one time. It took many, many efforts until he got elected. But his rallying cry was always, "I'm Harvey Milk and I'm here to recruit you." And he was very honest. I'm a gay man living in San Francisco, and mm-hmm. I'm here to represent the gay community.
Yes.
And his rally cry, "I'm here to recruit you," was something that really changed the face of civil rights.
Mm-hmm. And something that you mentioned in that was this idea of representation, right? The idea of, especially thinking back to when, it wasn't always 2020, when you can see LGBTQ things around you all the time. You really didn't see yourself in media, in books, in anything. You really didn't, in the only representation that did exist were negative representations. So, and even going back to the story you just shared with that young artist, even the representation of that voice that was able to bring to light a perspective that people did not consider or maybe didn't even understand or bother to understand. And I think that's something that's super important.
Yeah, and in both cases, it takes real, bravery. I mean, for Harvey Milk to stand up and say, "I'm gay and I want to go into politics," even though he was living in San Francisco, it was a very brave move. And Nikita standing up and saying, "Hey, we really need to look at this issue and that's dividing our community." It takes, when no one else is telling those stories, it takes a lot of bravery.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, especially when you're on that marginalized side, right? When you're on the side, you don't have an active fan group that is going to rally for you. You're really taking it.
Yeah. But having said that, there were some gay activists from way back leading up to our modern gay movement. Up in the corner here, we have Deborah Sampson. Deborah Sampson was during George Washington and Hamilton's time. She actually enlisted in the Army under a male's name and led a regiment as a leader in the Revolutionary War, which is just really amazing. She was also a writer and a poet. She was so brave and so effective that her family asked the government after she died if they could receive the veteran benefits, and they allowed it to happen, which is unheard of, because we went then after, we had to go through don't ask, don't tell, and all of that we had to go through. But back in the early 1900s, her family actually received her veterans' rights, even though she was dressed as a man and assumed a man's name as she was fighting.
That's awesome.
Bayard Taylor, he wrote a novel about the gold rush. He was also a poet, but then he worked for a newspaper and wrote a novel about the gold rush. Actually came to Colorado and worked with the Rocky Mountain News at one point. And in this little expose he did, he highlighted a gay couple that were out working the mines and trying to discover gold. And that gay couple had been together for 35 years when he met them.
Wow.
And that was in the newspapers. You know, he wrote it and put it in the newspapers. Archibald Gunter, he wrote a novel about lesbian, gay, and transsexuals that was later made into a movie in the 1940s. It's called The Florida Affair.
Mm.
And so he was telling those stories early. Gladys Bentley up in the right-hand side with the fur coat, she was from the Harlem Renaissance. So we're talking 1920s. She was an openly gay woman, she's lesbian, who rewrote popular songs with raunchy lyrics, and she would flirt with the women in the audience. I would have loved to have met Gladys. She sounds like she was a hoot.
I'm about to say a who, yes. Just a fool. I love it.
Right under her is Natalie Clifford Barney, who was a poet who published as early as 1900s her love poems to women that she loved.
Mm.
You know, these are really brave people. We're talking about people who were telling their stories and their truth
Openly.
in a world that wasn't really ready for it.
Openly with their name on it.
Yeah, but they were putting their names on it and doing it. Buford Delaney is an amazing modernist painter from the 1930s and 40s who struggled because he was an out gay man in New York. Well, first in Tennessee. He was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, moved to New York, and then finally ended his career living in Paris. But he, you know, as an openly gay Black man in New York, he went through lots of struggles. His paintings depict those struggles, and they're just unbelievably moving and beautiful. And then finally, I have to include Marsha P. Johnson, because leading up to the real, you know, what we consider the beginning of the gay movement, she was, well, I don't know how she would really describe herself. She's often called a drag queen. She might have been transsexual. We don't know enough about her, you know, to really, of what she said about herself to know. But she was one of the instigators at Stonewall, and her partner were really the ones that got the Stonewall riots going and the protest. And, you know, from her gone down, we've had a lot of change in our world. But it's just that I wanted to highlight these people because most people don't know them. But these are people who were telling their stories and changing the way people thought long before we actually had what we considered gay rights and the movement itself, and living their truths, which makes me emotional when I talk about them.
Absolutely. And even, you know, hearing about how each of them have their own unique way of storytelling, whether that's through, you know, painting and art, or through, you know, the news journals, or through performing, right? It seemed, you know, I like that you picked people that had very different avenues of how they express themselves. And I'm curious, when you say that these are the artists that really paved the way for gay rights activism, what does that mean for you? And how does their work contribute to where we are now?
I think we forget that there's been brave people telling their stories. You know, there's many more. These are just some that I've highlighted because there's some of them. I love history, and I love the history of the arts. And so these are the ones that I have felt affinity for. There's many more. But the idea that I'm going to live in the world and tell the story that I know is just so moving to me. I feel like they're heroes. You know, The Mexican playwright and storyteller Carlos Fuentes, he says, we tell stories so we know who we are. That's the magic. That's the big magic in stories. We can know who we are and understand who we are by the stories that we tell. And we can help other people understand things that they don't know without telling, that. So here's an example. I'm going to tell you a story from my life. I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, because my partner was ill and his family lived there. And his family were real Southerners. And I met Grandma Blocker, his grandma, to my partner's grandma. And she was everything you would think of a woman from the South. Full of kindness, really open, great cook.
I'm so black.
Her husband, we called Papa. He passed away, and they always did a great big huge Blocker Christmas. And he called and wanted to know if him and I would host the Christmas party, because we had been cleaning her ever since I moved there, because I liked Grandma Blocker, but I wanted to, change her a little bit.
Because she was some improvement.
Because she was so prejudiced. I'd been cleaning her house for months. Yeah, I went once a week to clean Grandma Blocker's house. And so she asked us if we would do the party. And we told her there were certain words that couldn't be used in our house if we did the party. And then my Tim was quite a provocative person. So he put up a Christmas tree and went out and bought a black angel and put it at the top of the tree. When the Blockers started showing up, they all were really, uncertain about a black angel on the top of the tree. And Grandma Blocker came forward and she made the announcement. She goes, you know what? There are certain words we're never going to use ever again. And she never did use those words ever again. And in fact, after him passed, Grandma Blocker got really ill, and she went into a rest home. And I had moved back to Denver by then. I went to go see her, and when I walked in the room, she hadn't recognized any of her grandchildren, or even her own daughter or son. But when I walked in, she goes, "That's my friend Sam." And we spent a whole afternoon telling stories, talking about what life used to be like, where life had gone, what she hoped would be the legacy of her life. She was mixed up in her mind, and so she had decided that in the rest home, they were the streets of Charleston. So she said, we're going to go down Ashley River Road right now over to this lovely little restaurant, which was the cafeteria.
Yeah.
We walked down Ashley River Road to the cafeteria. Amazing afternoon together. That evening, I held her hand, and she said that she thanked me for being her friend, Sam, and she passed away. We created a community and changed a world around us because we were willing to share our stories with each other. And I'm still very close to the Blocker clan, who at first was not sure if they should have gay people in the family. And they weren't sure about people of other races. And they don't think that way anymore because we sat down and shared stories about our lives. It's through stories that we're able to see through other people's eyes, and we're able to open up to the claims of others. And what I think Peter Forbes means by the claims of others is the way they live in the world. And that is how we create change, in my mind. It's one-on-one, and it's storytelling that does it. I know Harvey Milk was right. I know that Deborah Sampson was right. That, from the Revolutionary War, you affect people by the stories you tell them to help them understand the world in a new way.
Absolutely. And something that, as you were talking, something that really stuck with me was, and I'm using more of the word context, right? Looking at someone within like their own, I feel like one of the parts of like listening to someone's story is you're able to see them with context. Like, I think we, especially if it's something that's harmful to us, right? Going back to, uh, I'm so bad with names today. Mama, you just told the whole story about her.
Grandma Blocker.
Thank you, Grandma Blackard. Right, going back to, I think it's very easy, and not to say that it isn't fair, right, to write someone off that maybe it offends you or hurts you in various ways. But I think with that, you still have to look at people within context, right? So, what is the story behind these beliefs or behaviors or whatever that is? And you being able to kind of see that helps us be able to move forward, is kind of what I'm hearing too.
Absolutely. Context is it. And there are times that you have to just protect yourself and walk away. But
Mm-hmm.
I knew Grandma Blocker. I knew that she was a woman who was born in the 1920s, and she was raised with a certain belief and a certain worldview. And when that worldview was challenged by compassion and love, she rose to the occasion and she changed.
Hmm.
And she changed when she was in her late 90s. It wasn't like she was a spring chicken and she was trying to change. She was an older woman, and yet she still, when confronted with real emotion and real love and real compassion, and confronted with what my truth was, she couldn't deny my truth because I was being honest with her. Nor could I deny her truth.
Mm.
And that's where we were able to find compromise and become really dear friends.
Mm-hmm. And with that, it reminds me too of when you were talking about coming out stories. I remember in college, I was president of our GSA, and one of the things we would do every year on coming out day or around coming out day was, a time where we would all just come together and tell our own coming out stories. That could be whatever, gay people, we have gay and trans people, we have 100 coming out stories because every time.
Yes, we do. And sometimes you have multiple stories.
About the same person that you came the fifth time because they don't want to listen. But anyway, and those experiences, even though they were heavy, even though people cried and laughed, because everyone's story is so different, and even the way people tell their stories too, right? It was so impactful especially for the people who didn't share, for the people that just wanted to experience, whether they were straight or a part of the community. People would leave with a different understanding of the community and around even just privilege of being able to come out and be accepted, or or coming out and being completely rejected. I think it just really it blurred that line to where it didn't necessarily matter how your experience was. What mattered was the connection everyone was feeling in the room at that point.
That's a really great example of the power of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now I'm going to, switch a little bit and try to bring in jobs, because I know some of this is about. I want to be really clear that the theater artists that I know that have worked. I've been doing theater now since I was 19 and I'm in my 50s. The people that I know that have had longevity in working in the theater are the people that really love storytelling. And they do it because they believe the stories they're going to put onto the stage are going to make a difference. I mean, think of just the momentous change and things of Hamilton and that play. Just think of that play and everything that it has done and the conversation it has sparked because of the passion of telling a story and telling the story and making sure that we looked at diversity and we looked at inclusion and we looked at privilege, and that play has changed the conversation in the United States. And that's what theater practitioners want to do. And really, it's every job within theater is about making how to tell the best story you can tell. So there's lots and lots of jobs. There are marketing, and there are, costumers and lighting people and construction sets, and there's the actors and the directors and the producers. And what brings them all together is as a collaborative process is we're all going to take on this one story, and how do we tell that story the best? And so how they do that is the director, when they're chosen to do a play and the play is selected, he or she comes up with a director's concept. What is going to be the thing about this story? How do we tell this story in a specific way? So here's an example from one of the plays I did. I was doing Macbeth. I can say it because I'm not in a theater. You're supposed to avoid saying it. But Macbeth. And Macbeth is a play about violence. It's a play about violence occurring and the cycle of violence, that violence creates violence. When I read through the play, it mentions blood about 160 times throughout the play in different contexts. So what I decided when we went to put this play on is that I wanted the blood to represent this cycle of violence, and I wanted the blood to get worse, more and more and more throughout the play to show that the violence is happening. So when the first death happens, it's a play about murder, basically. When the first murder happens, when Lady Macbeth and Macbeth kill Duncan, they dunk their hands, the witches bring out a basin of blood, and they put their hands in the blood, and instead of stabbing the king, they just wipe their hands onto the king, and everyone is dressed in pure white. And they just wipe it, but they don't wipe their hands off. So from there on, anytime they touched someone, they kept spreading blood. As they killed another person, they would dunk their hands in the blood again. So by the time we kill Macduff's wife and children, the witches just poured a river of blood across the stage, and we dragged Macduff and the kids through the blood with them kicking, and the blood went everywhere. So now the set was starting to be covered with blood. At the end of the play, when Malcolm comes back, because he leaves right at the beginning, so he left all pristine white, he comes back to take the throne. And when Macduff crowns him king, he puts his hand on the pure white clothing and leaves a handprint as the lights go down and the show ends. So in order to do that concept, we had all the customers having to figure out, how do you get blood out of white costumes night after night after night? We had the set having to figure out, how do we do an all-white set but still make it interesting? The lighting designers were apoplectic because a white set with white clothing is really hard to light. And what do we do with that? The marketing had to figure out, how are we going to market this play, since this is really going to be talking about violence creating violence? What is the essence of that that's going to capture people's imagination to come see the play? The ticket sales, the producers, and for everyone is now engaged in a story about how violence creates violence, and what does that mean in all their different avenues. And that's the exciting part of theater. You get to work with these crazy and creative, imaginative minds that all are thinking differently, that have to all be brought together so that the story is cohesive.
And what I really appreciate what you're sharing too is, I think too, when people think about a career in theater, they think about wanting to be involved in plays or theater, or even we're talking about television, things like that. How, depending on how far you want to go with it. I think the initial thought is, oh, I need to be able to act. Oh, I need to be able to write a script. I need to be able to do these things that we kind of automatically think about, or at least when I think about theater, those are like the first skill sets that come to my mind. And really what you're saying is there's so many different aspects and important details that go into telling a story, that really you can take what your talent is, as long as it's something that's creative and and you can take that and apply it and still be a part of that storytelling process.
Absolutely. And I know that you put that flyer, I don't know what to call it, that little I have that breakdown of all the different jobs. It's the front and back that you were going to post on the Facebook page.
Yes.
So anyone who wants to go and look, because there's hundreds of jobs beyond the playwright and the actor and the director. And it takes imagination and creativity and problem solving to make all of the aspects come together so the audience has an enjoyable time and understands the story.
Mm-hmm. And just so viewers know, I do have that list. I haven't posted to Facebook yet. I will be posting it immediately. No shade.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you out.
Oh, no worries. Listen, I'm fine. But yes, I'll be posting that immediately after this video. And it is an extensive list, y'all. There's so many ways you can be involved, even if acting is not your skill set. There is so many ways to be involved and to take skills that you may already be into. I'm talking, and especially my cosplayers out there, costume design, all of these different, and makeup design and skill, being able to do that, right? All of those things tie in. So if you have that skill set, just think about it. Even if it's a side hustle, think about really taking those talents and putting them into somewhere in the story making, storytelling field, however you choose to be involved in that way.
Yeah. And the other thing is that even with COVID and not having the theaters open, now we're going to digital things where, like, one of the ideas is we're going to do Shakespeare in the parking lot, where people can bring their cars and sit in their cars and tune to a radio station and watch a performance, from your car. Isn't that cool?
Like a drive-in theater.
Yeah, drive-in theater with drive-in live theater, but outside, so the actors are safe because it's outside. You're not so close, and the audience is in their cars watching.
Mm-hmm.
So theater won't die because of COVID. There's brand new kinds of ways are going to happen, and they're still going to need all those different amazing creative people to make those productions happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if anyone's interested, you can contact me at the DCPA, and I can, spend some time talking to you about careers in theater and what that takes education-wise and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now I want to go over to the other side, because I think, and really we talked about stories, and we've talked about how theater people put stories together. I really want to leave you with something tangible. So if you're sharing a Facebook, story, or you're on Instagram, or you're doing even a story on Twitter, or all the other electronic ways that we share stories now, what are some of the essence of creating an effective story? So I have a little short list that I've kind of compiled over my years of being in theater. And the first thing is simple language. And what I mean by this, I'm going to use an example, because in my dress rehearsal, I was told to have better examples. So when I was a kid, the Snoopy and the Peanuts were big, and they had all kinds of specials on television. And in one of the specials, Snoopy was writing a novel. And, he's a dog, if you don't know who the Peanuts are. And he's writing a novel, and he starts his novel off, "It was a dark and stormy night." Simple language would mean making it really direct, keeping it active. So, night had fallen, a storm raged. Really short sentences that go straight to the point. Using language that not trying to find highfalutin language that you never experienced, and keeping it as simple and as direct as you can keep it.
Mm.
That's when someone can enter into your world and into your life and into your understanding of the world. Making it complex or feeling like I have to use really fancy words, it never works. Going right to the point, keeping it really simple. That's
And to that point too, I think when people do one or two things, and people try to, because that's one of my pet peeves too, is when people try to use very complicated words that they probably don't even know the meaning to, is you may be using it out of context and you're using the word wrong, so like everyone's confused. Like, I know we've all been like, have seen that person in class that is like going on and they're just trying to make themselves sound smart, but literally none of it makes sense. Like, the words do not go together like that.
Yeah, keep it short. Don't do big long sentences. Keep short sentences, short active sentences.
Yes, and the other point I was going to make is around accessibility as well, right? I think too, when you're talking about simple language, it sounds like too, you want it to be something that everyone can relate to, everyone can connect to, and it's very hard to do that if it's something that people are not familiar with. That's why
That's a great point. I love that. I never thought about accessibility that way. You're absolutely right. I love that. So the next one is empathy, and you've got to help the listener find empathy for for the story that you're telling. So, I think if I go back to the example of Nikita and her play about the hanging tree, she did not present anyone as villains in the town. She presented all of their points of view as honestly as she could and as straightforward as she could. And she wasn't assigning judgment. She was just saying, these are all the things that people say and see, and when they look at this tree in the middle of town. And because she didn't draw villains and she made everyone empathetic, it allowed people to enter into a discussion after the play was over about the impact of this tree, the symbol standing in the middle of town, that was able to move toward positive change. Had she made one side a villain and the other side not, I don't think that dialogue would have resulted in bringing down the tree and setting up a memorial. It would have caused too many, it would have added flame to the already existing divide.
Yeah, it would have fueled the conflict in a way.
Yeah, and having both sides have to have empathy for the other side, because that's the way she wrote it. It made that there could be change. It opened a door of dialogue, which then created change. Okay, the next thing is backing your story with research. I changed it. It used to say with data. But what I mean by this is that just telling a heartfelt story isn't enough to create change. You also have to put it it's what was said earlier, it has to be put within a context. So when I was at Kaiser Permanente, I actually worked with Rainbow Alley youth, and we created a play about homeless youth in the medical world, and things that happen when someone's homeless, goes to a hospital or a doctor's office, and how they're treated as less than a normal person because they're homeless, they don't have insurance, and all the stigma that comes with that. And we were able to create an effective story. It was about a drag queen who needed medical help, dressed in drag. And this was early 2000s when we did this play. We actually toured it all over Capitol Hill at different and at the Kaiser Permanente medical centers. And we were also able to add into that actual research within the dialogue that helped them understand this was more than just one person's experience. And in the early 2000s, there was 2.5 million young people that were homeless across the country. This number has changed, actually. It's gotten worse. And at that time, 50,000 young people in Colorado alone. And 2/3 of those homeless youth were LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
That was information that we brought into the play through different dialogue, so that it wasn't just simply about, oh, this person was treated badly by this one clinic, but this is a systemic problem in our state, and it's a problem that has to be addressed so that people can have access to healthcare, and access to healthcare where they feel safe and supported and valued as a person. And so backing up the story with that research. So it wasn't just simply, one person had a bad experience, changed the essence of that play. And we had many healthcare workers come up to us after the play was over to want to know about how do we change the environment in our office so that we're welcoming, that we are, accepting, that we're allowing people to come in and be who they are, and not trying to put people into little, cubby holes. Yeah. You're this way, you're this way, you're this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something that is also sticking out for me when you're talking about this is the idea of kind of almost making it real. Like the research is what takes it out of this fictional, like, oh, this is a story, to this is real life. This actually has real world impact, and this is how it impacts.
Yes.
Just kind of makes you sit with the fact that, oh, this thing that I can empathize with, right? We just talked about the empathy piece. This thing I can empathize with is something that is in real time happening around me.
Yeah. And it's not just a one person or a made up story or whatever. It goes beyond that. And then this is because of Samuel Nathan Wood. This is nothing about any other theater artist. I believe that when we're telling these stories, there needs to be a call to action into that story. And it doesn't have to be with a great big club and beat you over your head. So I'm going to use Hamilton as the example. In Act 1, the song they sing, that George Washington and Hamilton is having a discussion over what he was, his actions and his first campaign that ended disastrously. The song is "History Has Its Eyes on You." And it fits perfectly within the Act 1 conclusion, but yet you can't hear those words, "History has its eyes on you," without reflecting about yourself. And then at the end of the play, that same melody, which is "History has your eyes on you," is repeated. And now the lines are, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?" I think that's really profound for the discussion that we're having. What is the story that you're living, and who is going to tell your story? Have you shared your story with enough people that your story will live on? And he doesn't, it's not a great big beat your head, with a great big stick saying this is the theme of the play, but it's written in, and there is a call to action. There is, you leave Hamilton, and I left, at least, wanting to do something about this world, wanting to think about inclusion and diversity and in a new way, and be a force for good, and have my story be part of that.
No, I really appreciate that point too. And I think too, you mentioned, the call to action doesn't have to be this big thing that's just like, okay, we get the point. What I liked about the example you used was it was actually something really subtle, and it was something that it sticks with you. And even if you don't make it to the point where you're out in the streets protesting or something, there's still at least a call to action to reflect and to really figure out, what does this all mean for me? And even that to a point can be a call of action.
I completely agree. I clicked stop sharing so I could see people again. No, I don't. It didn't do anything.
Oh, you can't see it?
Back? How do I come back?
Did you click the tab with the StreamYard?
It said stop streaming, so I clicked that tab. Ooh. And now, oh, there you are. Hi. Because I was blind the whole time looking at the PowerPoint only. So I guess that's everything that I wanted to express tonight. Is there any questions or something that,
Yes, please, if you have questions about theater, about storytelling, about the power of storytelling, please post a comment, send us a chat. We'll totally down to answer it. I was going to ask a question.
Good.
And yeah, and I think we've talked about this more and more, or not more and more. I think we have touched on this, but really, I wanted to ask if you could speak on the power of representation.
Yeah.
In storytelling.
Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest thing that has changed in my lifetime. I think I told you the story during our dress rehearsal. In the 80s, as a young gay man, I never saw our community on the screen, and in the movie houses, or on the stage, or I never really saw that visible representation of our world. And I was raised Mormon, which is worse. Conservative Mormon. And when I was in graduate school, I didn't tell you this during the dress rehearsal. I was given an initial script of Angels in America and asked if I would read it to give feedback from the Mormon, world, because Tony Krishna was not Mormon, and he was using that as a launching pad, the culture of Mormonism, to talk about all these issues of inclusion, but didn't really know it. So I wrote a lot of notes in the script about, well, this is how Mormons would say this is this perspective, this is the doctrine, etc. And then I had a chance to go to New York City and see it in production. And I saw one of the very first performances. And it was really emotional. And I'll get emotional now, because I was able to see me, Samuel Wood, Mormon kid, watching a show about a gay Mormon. Mm-hmm. And that impact, I can't tell you what that did for me.
I think
my coming out was very difficult. I came out and I didn't talk to my family for a good 20 years. But being able to see my story on stage made me know I'm not by myself. And I think that's when we talk about sharing who we are through our stories, it's really important for young people out there to know and hear what other people are experiencing, so that they find themselves and understand themselves, and that they are represented in this world. And it's going to take brave people. It always takes brave people to step forward and say, this is my truth.
I'm sitting with that for a second. That was super powerful. Something that also stood out to me while you were talking was because you didn't say this when we rehearsed, was that you, in a way, when you say you saw yourself in that play, in a way you were kind of in that play. You gave that feedback. You gave that perspective to make it something real, that research we were talking about. And I don't know, to me, that really stood out to me, of how you really got to see yourself kind of portrayed in a way that honors your experience. Yeah. And when I think about the power of representation, I think that's part of it too, is that's an empowering experience to see yourself and to also see characters, with those same identities, go through those same trials and tribulations that you're going through, kind of like you were just talking about, going through those same trials and tribulations, how they manage to survive, how they manage to become, you know, the adult version of what they always wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think I love that story. That's so beautiful.
And for me, I think this is our new frontier, especially for our community, is that now we've finally opened up the conversation about, you know, who should play what on in film, and we need more representation to represent the country and not just have, you know, and so this is our new frontier. We're just starting to really break down these barriers, and it really will be, you know, our young people that will step forward with bravery and start to tell the stories that will impact the way we're going to change our, you know, the industry. And it's happening. It's going to be slow, but it's actually happening, and the door has creaked open, so where we can actually talk about the really hard topics of representation on the stage and in film and, you know, in the performance world.
Another question I had, and this is more kind of around the career of theater and storytelling, for young people who maybe don't either have the confidence or don't know exactly how they would be involved in production and things like that. What is your advice to young people wanting to step into that world? How do they get there?
There's lots of avenues. I think that the biggest avenue is we do a lot of scholarships at the Denver Center for Performing Arts. So I wouldn't think of, you know, I would sign up for some classes and then say, hey, I need a scholarship. We actually have donors that give money just to make sure that young people are in classes, in theater classes. So I don't think that that is a barrier. I would go to the DCPA website and see what's happening. Right now, we only have a few offerings because, you know, we're trying to figure this COVID-19 world out. As the fall happens, there'll be more and more. And I think you just have to give it a shot. You know, take a playwriting class, take a acting class. We have tech classes. We have makeup classes. During Halloween, we're going to do a zombie class, how to be a zombie. Which will be fun because, you know, downtown we do the zombie crawl, and I don't know if we're going to be able to do the zombie crawl this year. So how do you do the zombie crawl in your home?
A virtual mob of online zombies.
Yeah, and we have an amazing makeup lady, Rachel, who's going to be teaching how to do the zombie makeup. And so, you know, I think it's challenging yourself and jumping out there and, you know, holding your breath and giving it a try and having fun. And then, of course, you can always, any young people that have questions that come to you, Shaya, you can just give them, you know, forward them on to me. I'd be more than happy to, you know, help. Because there is education involved. Very few theater artists don't, you know, they all have education backing, you know, to get to where they are. So you know, and I can help talk about those kinds of things.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, y'all. If y'all are interested and y'all want more information, more than what we were able to talk about during this time, please feel free to reach out to me. Please feel free to reach out to Sam, because we want to get you to where you need to be. And you know, I think too, you never know what. I like that you said, just put yourself out there. And I think the most important part, right? Have fun. The whole point is, if it's something that you're passionate about, is not about are you good or not. It's about in that situation and figuring out where do you fit in that culture, in that role. And yeah.
When I was a young man, I went to the Loose Moose Theater. It's Keith Johnston's theater in Alberta, Canada. It's he's like the father of improv. And that whole summer, I hate improv. I'm really bad at it. That's why I went. But that whole summer, his mantra was dare to be bad. Because if you can dare to be bad, then you can be good. But you have to first dare to be bad. Every time you would go on stage, you said, I want it to be the worst thing you've ever done. Go for it.
Literally. Oh, I remember that with I took piano lessons. My teacher always said, if you're gonna make a mistake, make a big one. I want to hear it. Like I want to hear.
Go for it and embrace it, because that's the only way you can finally figure out how to be good. So yeah, dare to be bad.
We're getting to the end of our time. I'm not seeing any questions in the comments section, which is totally cool. But we're coming to the end of that time, and I'm curious about, do you have any final thoughts that something that maybe we didn't get to cover, or a point that you didn't get to make during the talk that you want to make now?
A final thought. I think my final thought is you got to find joy in everything you do.
A word. That's definitely something I definitely believe in too. So yeah, I love that. Find joy in everything that you do. If you're not getting joy from it, what are you doing it for? I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
How is it serving you? It's not fueling you. I love it. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching after the fact. If you weren't able to make it to the live stream, please, if you are tuning in, even if you didn't get a chance to before, please feel free to rewatch the whole thing. We are doing surveys, y'all. If you fill out a survey, you can be entered into a raffle to win a gift card. So listen, get that free money. That's all I'm trying to say. If you need to take the pre-survey, it is the exact same link as this post-survey link. The only difference is the 2 is a 1, and that will get you to the pre-survey. Thanks again for Sam, just bringing the energy, bringing the laughter, bringing the stories, bringing the joy. It's super, I don't know, you're super engaging to just listen to, which, I mean, makes sense. You're a storyteller, so good at your job.
Thank you.
Love it. Yeah, you have engaged. And also, as always, thank you to Kendra and Rain Frog Interpreters for giving us giving us ASL interpretation throughout this evening and throughout this series. Don't look at me like that. Okay. Okay, everybody. Join us next week. We're still doing speakers next week, Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So join us live on the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. Honestly, however you're watching right now, come back next week and we're going to do it again. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your night. Let's keep it clean, queer, and under control.
I love that.